How's it going, everyone? It's Harvey from Weather Sponge 5000, and in this video, of course, we're going to talk about this tropical disturbance that's just south of Puerto Rico at this time, and take a look at the latest update from the National Hurricane Center. It now has a high chance of tropical cyclone formation, and it looks like the projected path from the National Hurricane Center wants to take this straight towards Central America, where between the next 48 hours, we have around a 30% chance, and then within the next 7 days, it quickly rises up to a 70% chance. So at this point, you guys at the very least should expect a tropical storm as the Central American coast and even further inland. You definitely need to pay very close attention to this, because there is still that possibility this could be an even more impactful storm if this were to strengthen into a hurricane, which is certainly in the realm of possibilities. So here's a quick look at the water vapor imagery, and as for Invest 96L, it now has a 0% chance of formation, as it seems like it's been dealing with too much dry air as well as too much wind shear for anything convective that's at least tropical induced to form right just off the coast of the southeast, so nothing to worry about there. However, of course, our main concern in this video is this area of convective activity right here, where we do see a thunderstorm activity is quite strong right over Dominican Republic and just south of Puerto Rico, as well as this convective activity is expected to develop eventually a low level center. This convective activity is induced by a trough that's moving just to the north of this storm system, at least what's left of it, and then this area of activity is going to get trapped by a ridge that's located right in the middle of the Atlantic, and then it's going to be forced to move to the west, and as it does so, with the sea surface temperatures of the Caribbean much warmer than average, it's expected to develop a low level center and potentially develop into a powerful tropical cyclone. At least as of right now, it seems like the convective activity is a bit too spread out for a well-defined low-level center to develop and for all the convergence to really circulate around it, as we do see the thunder shower activity is quite elongated, but eventually it's expected that it'll become a little bit more compact, as developing a low-level center doesn't happen overnight. It takes often several days to potentially weeks at times, especially when it's the convective activity is over a very spread out area, because it takes time for the air molecules to find out where the area of lowest pressure will be, and for the convective activity to become a little bit more compact. So it could take several days before we really see a low level center, but the quicker it develops, the more likely we're going to see rapid intensification, which is definitely concerning, and hopefully we see the low level center struggle to develop over at least for as long as possible till it reaches Central America, but that still has yet to be seen. So just like yesterday, the GFS model has been the more aggressive model when it comes to intensifying this disturbance. If we were to continue to move forward with the forecast, by the time we approach the 3-day mark, that's when the GFS model wants to develop a well-defined low-level center as well as a tropical storm just south of the Dominican Republic as well as Haiti. But in these areas, you need to, although the eye will be well to the south of you guys, you still need to be aware of heavy rainfall over the next several days, especially in the higher elevations that could induce flash flood risks. So you definitely want to be prepared if you live in the more flood prone areas of Dominican Republic, Haiti, and even towards Jamaica and southern Cuba. Definitely keep in mind that this is going to produce heavy rainfall, even though the center circulation will be well to the south of you guys. And continuing to move forward with the forecast, what's interesting is that we see that the low level center is going to be sort of in a position displaced from the mid-level low pressure system, where you could probably tell by the isobars the mid-level center or the mid-level low is located right here, while the lower level low pressure system is located just to the west of that, and that will certainly help mitigate the intensification process as the storm continues to head further westward, and which is certainly good news. We're definitely going to need to see how the upper level winds and the lower level winds shift with height, because that will be key in determining if the storm system will have just enough of a elongated circulation for the storm system to be able to strengthen as much, or at least a position to where the upper level clouds will be in the same position as the lower level center, and the mid level low will be in the same location. Because in a scenario, if we were to have a low level center away from the mid level low and the upper level ridge, then that'll create an area too elongated for much intensification. A lot of tropical cyclones need a more compact storm system between the upper levels as well as the lower levels of the atmosphere for the intensification to be maximized, as well as convergence along the center circulation. And we do see the GFS model expects that the winds should lighten down in the upper levels just a bit, at least compared to the mid levels and the lower levels, which is causing this displacement between the mid-level low and low pressure system. So we aren't seeing the GFS model, at least compared to yesterday, wanting to strengthen this storm as quickly, which is certainly good news. Hopefully the GFS model continues that trend where we begin to see a bit more of a displacement between the different levels of the atmosphere when it comes to the areas of low pressure, because that will certainly make it more difficult for this storm to rapidly intensify. However, nevertheless, we see the GFS model still wanting to strengthen this into a hurricane, and potentially a quite powerful hurricane, potentially a category 2 at landfall, with its millibar pressure hovering around 987 millibars, makes landfall in the northern coast of Nicaragua, and that would certainly bring major impacts, not just with rainfall, but with wind. Coastal flooding would of course be a concern. Power outages would be likely in a scenario like this. So and there could be that possibility of landslides in the higher elevations of Nicaragua, Honduras, and even as far south as Costa Rica with this much heavy rain. And we do see it doesn't stop at Nicaragua and Honduras. This brings impacts to El Salvador, Guatemala, Belize, and even into the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico in the more long-term future. But the good news is that it does weaken, and we aren't seeing the GFS model wanting to take this storm northward into Cuba and the United States like it was yesterday, as the GFS model in today's run is leaning a little bit more towards the fact that it is going to deal with a bit more ridging as this continues ahead further westward than anticipated. So originally, the reason why the GFS model wanted to take this storm further northward is due to the fact that there's going to be an upper level low moving through the northern Midwest, and it expected the upper level low to be strong enough to shift the wind direction from coming from an easterly direction to more of a southwesterly direction to steer this northward into the United States. However, in the latest GFS model run, it's leaning a little bit more to what the European model is forecasting, in that this upper level low won't be strong enough and won't dip down far south enough to pick this storm up, or at least steer as far north as quickly as it originally anticipated. We're going to need to see if this trend continues, because we're still 5 days out. We could easily see this upper level low become stronger than anticipated and steer this storm more quickly to the north to bring more impacts to Cuba and potentially Florida. We still have some of the ensemble members wanting to take a track further northward, so it's definitely not out of the realm of possibilities just yet. So I'll keep you guys updated if we were to see any major shifts with the trajectory forecast. Really all depends on this upper level low. And take a look at what the European model is forecasting when it comes to the track. The European model is expecting even more ridging, which is the reason why the European model wants to take this storm system closer, pretty much due west rather than a little bit to the northwest, like what the GFS model wants to do. So that's the reason why we don't necessarily see the heavy rainfall move as far northward, as we see the storm system just fizzles out right over Central America, maybe bringing some energy to the Eastern Pacific, but outside of that, it isn't bringing any energy to the north to bring any impacts to Cuba and Florida. But I'll keep you guys updated if we were to see any major shifts when it comes to the strength of this low and the trajectory forecasts. And when it comes to the European model, when it comes to its strength forecast, we see the European model is expecting the storm system to struggle a lot more. And like I said, it's due in part due to the pretty big disparity in wind speed between different levels of the atmosphere. We see that in the European model's case, the winds along the lower levels are moving even slower than the winds we're seeing in the mid levels, and you could probably tell based on the water vapor imagery, the moisture is a bit lopsided surrounding the center circulation. Most of the moisture is located on the western half, while the eastern half has a little bit of moisture, but it's still very asymmetrical, the storm system, and there's just too large of an area of moisture for this to develop a compact enough low-level center for this to rapidly intensify, which is the reason why the European model doesn't bring much more than a weak tropical storm, potentially a storm system that's even weaker than that. I'll still say that the European model is a little bit too conservative with this forecast. I do believe that it's going to be stronger as it approaches Central America because upper level winds will be very favorable as it continues ahead further westward. We will see an upper level high right over this storm system, so I do believe that it'll at least strengthen into tropical storm. The European model is a bit too weak in its forecast. I believe it seems like a lot of indications are pointing towards this at least developing into a tropical storm, and I definitely wouldn't rule out a hurricane, but the key thing we're going to need to pay close attention to is the wind speed between the different levels of the atmosphere, because that will determine how organized the storm will be and and the exact location of which in which the upper level low and the clouds in the upper levels will be located relative to the lower level center. So we're definitely going to need to pay very close attention to that over the next few days. But we do see wind shear is very light. There won't be a lot of stable air that's going to inhibit this storm. It's really all dependent on really the wind difference between the different levels of the atmosphere. And like I said in my previous videos, the sea surface temperatures right over the Caribbean are very concerning. They're much warmer than average, hovering around the upper 80s. During this time of the year, we'd see sea surface temperatures that should hover more so around the mid to low 80s right over the Caribbean. But of course, this year is different. This year is bringing sea surface temperatures much warmer than average, and that's only going to fuel the possibility of this developing into a tropical storm and potentially a hurricane. So throughout Central America, definitely be aware of this. There's still that possibility it could maybe avoid you guys, depending on how strong this low is right over the United States, but it's still a bit too uncertain to say. But even if the center circulation doesn't necessarily move over Jamaica, Cuba, and the Hispaniola area, you still should expect very heavy rainfall. So here's a current look at the GFS ensemble members, and we clearly see that there's still plenty of ensemble members. At least, in fact, most of the ensemble members do want to take this storm eventually further northward, and it's a bit concerning because we do have several of the ensemble members wanting to develop this into a hurricane and take a hurricane right over Cuba, and this could easily, in the more long-term future, in a scenario like this, impact the southern Florida area. So you definitely can't rule out the possibility this moves further northward, despite the fact that the National Hurricane Center is leaning towards a track, or at least is showing a track that seems like it's moving directly to the west. I definitely wouldn't rule out a northern track either. So Cuba, you still need to be aware of that possibility, as well as Jamaica and southern Florida. In terms of the European ensemble members, we do see that most of them do want to take this maximum at weak tropical storm strength. But most of them don't believe that this will develop into a tropical storm. But I do believe the European model is a bit too weak in its forecast. It seems like the conditions will be favorable enough for a tropical storm, so you should expect that at this time for the coast of Central America and other Caribbean islands if this were to impact you guys, which still, of course, has yet to be seen. But that's it for now, guys, and I thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe if you want to see more weather-related content, and I hope you guys all have a great day.